Once upon a time, there lived 3 dragons on 3 mountains. They were brothers, and each ruled over their own mountain. One was black, called Bar, one was red, called Ra, and one was green, called Gar. In the middle of the 3 mountains lay a small kingdom ruled over by a human king, but the dragons paid little attention to this. Within the kingdom, however, the dragons caused much anxiety. "They will come any day and murder us all," cried the townspeople. "They are a threat and must be destroyed," cried the knights. "They fly over the city as if they own it," complained the king. And fly they did, although the dragons had no interest in ruling over humans. They flew over the kingdom and around the mountains like skilled athletes, spitting flames at each other and trying to knock each other out of the sky. To the humans, this looked like fighting, but in reality they were only playing. So life between the 3 mountains continued in this way for many decades, and although the people complained endlessly about the 3 creatures, all were content to leave the problem alone as long as the dragons did not harm them. But as the king got older, his anxiety and greed grew. He wished to rule over the kingdom with an iron hand, and the terrifying creatures represented a threat to his authority. But as much as he campaigned to send an army out to each peak, the soldiers and knights of his kingdom refused, coming up with various excuses to leave the situation alone. So when a wandering knight came from far away with a proposal to slay the dragons, the king listened. "I have climbed into their lairs and listened to their whisperings, my king," said the knight. "The red dragon, Ra, is belligerent, but ultimately foolish. The green dragon, Gar, has an iron will, but uses it for peace. And the black dragon, Bar, is weak-hearted and artistic." "Peace," said the king. "I am sure that is just a lie. All monsters' true natures come out eventually. Excellent work. And you wish to slay them all?" The knight smiled. "For the right price, of course." "Very well, but let's be patient. You will go out and slay just one of them first. Then we will discuss the rest." "I would not advise that, my king," said the knight. "It would be much safer to kill them all in one go." Said the king. "I am the one who makes the orders around here, and I do not know if I can trust you yet. I think Bar would be the best to start with. If, as you say, he is weak-hearted, then you should have no difficulty in defeating him. Bring me his head as proof." The knight lowered his head. "Of course, my king. I will bring glory to your kingdom." So in the dead of the night climbed the mountain and entered Bar's lair. While the dragon slept, dreaming of paintings and sculptures, the knight poured a poison into his nose. The dragon's breathing went deeper and deeper until it finally stopped, and the knight began the difficult task of cutting off the dragon's head. When the king saw the head, he was thrilled. He placed it on the outside of the castle and loudly declared to the people that the threat of the dragons was coming to an end. The townspeople were not happy, though, as now the dragons threatened them even more. Surely they would come for revenge. But the king waved away their concerns, saying that their little problem would be dealt with soon enough. Unfortunately for the king, the dragons acted faster. Furious at his brother's death, Ra the belligerent dragon swept over the kingdom and roared into the sky. "Who is responsible for this?" Then he saw the king down below, standing proudly by Bar's head. Without hesitating, the dragon dived down and grabbed the head in his claws before raining fire on the castle. "Help! Help!" cried the king. The knights and servants ran screaming out of the castle, all courage gone, as Ra flew down again and tore apart the stone with his claws. Within minutes, the entire castle had been reduced to a flaming mess. "You're lucky I don't kill you all!" roared Ra, before flying away to his mountain. Once the remains of the castle had been cleared and the panic had died down, the king spoke with his men. "You see, they are a threat that we should have gotten rid of long ago." "My king, I have a different perspective," said his advisor. "I must say I was very surprised that you did not ask for my advice when planning this action. I could have saved us all from disaster. But anyway, do you not think this was planned by our enemies? This strange knight appeared from nowhere and offered shining dreams of peace. And what has he brought us? Death and destruction. He must be imprisoned at once." "Perhaps you are right," said the king. Having seen the dragon in action, he felt far less confident about killing the remaining two now. "He is an assassin, and he could kill any one of us. Guards, seize him!" The foreign knight, who had been drinking himself blind at one of the expensive drinking houses in the city, was dragged out by his neck, insulted by the people, and locked up in the deepest, darkest dungeon of the castle. "Hey, you can't leave me here," said the knight. "I told you, it would have been safer to kill them all at once." "Quiet, spy," hissed the king. "You should consider yourself lucky that I am letting you live." But the king wished to take no risks, so when nobody else was looking, he stole the poison the knight had used to kill the dragon. The assassin's imprisonment calmed the people, who were always eager to blame enemies from abroad, and when Ra did not show up for a week, they assumed they were safe again. That was until one day an unexpected visitor showed up outside the city gates. Gar, his scales shining green like morning grass, stood outside the city, a piece of white cloth hanging from his mouth. His eyes were red from the tears of his brother, but he did not look angry like Ra. People were throwing rocks and spitting at him, but he ignored them completely. "What does that dragon want?" said the king. "It appears he wishes to make peace with us," said the king's advisor. "He has an offer." "An offer," mumbled the king. "Damn, I hate negotiations. But fine, bring him in. Perhaps we can get him to turn against his brother." But what Gar sought was not war, but to help. "I feel so bad for what my brother did. We do not know what killed Bar, but I cannot imagine that it was anyone from your kingdom. For decades we have lived in peace. No, someone must have come from outside to kill him, although I do not know why." The king and his men kept entirely silent on the matter of Bar's death. "I want to show how sorry I am for Ra's actions. I will help you rebuild the castle. I can bring in strong stone from far away that will resist even the hottest dragon's fire. I promise that this land will see peace once more." The king had not been expecting such a proposal, but he was in no position to refuse. Without a castle, they would be defenseless against further attacks. "We accept your kind offer," said the king. So over the next few weeks, a rush of activity began to rebuild the castle. Ra, in the meantime, was occupied with other matters, crying over his brother's death and trying to find the cause of it. Dragon skin was hard as diamonds, so it would take an incredible strength to kill a dragon by cutting its head off. That must have happened afterwards, and there were no other visible signs of struggle on Bar's body. The only hint was a strange smell coming from Bar's nose, a faint, spicy smell, that of carnations. So Ra sought the help of a medicine dragon who inspected the body for many hours before finally concluding he was poisoned. Poisoned? To make a poison this powerful, only a human is capable of it. So Ra had been right all along. Filled once again with anger, he flew out to the humans' land and saw Gar working alongside them, building the new castle. "Brother, what are you doing?" he shrieked. "Do not hurt them, Ra," said Gar, covering the castle with his wings. "They did not do it, I am sure." "You are wrong. They poisoned him and displayed his head on their castle." Gar hesitated and then said, "I have seen no such thing." The people of the kingdom watched the skies anxiously. Their fate hung in the balance between these two great creatures. "What are they saying?" hissed the king. "I cannot understand their language." "It is the language of the dragons," said his advisor. "A foul tongue." "You did not see his head there because I took it from them," cried Ra. "And I know how they killed him. They used poison smelling of sweet carnations." For a moment, Gar was shocked and had nothing to say, but eventually he shook his head. "What will you get by hurting them? We lived in peace for almost 100 years. We can have peace again." Ra spat out a huge column of flame, which just missed Gar. "I don't believe you!" "This is what Ba would have wanted," replied Gar. Ra shook his head. "Ba might have been soft-hearted like you, but even he understood that peace cannot come when there is a boot on our neck." And without warning, the dragon threw himself forward and grabbed Gar by the neck. Gar hit Ra with his tail and pushed him off before flying high up into the clouds. Ra followed, and the two monsters disappeared into the veil of clouds. The people watched, but all they could see were red and green outlines pushing occasionally through. They heard everything, though. The gnashing of teeth, the clanging of claws, and the horrible roars that shook every building of the city. The king stared up at the sky, practically unable to breathe. This was all the fault of that night, and at any moment one of those dragons could come crashing down and destroy the entire city. "My king," said the advisor, "we have prepared the catapults. Which dragon should we attack?" The king woke up from his dream and saw a row of 10 catapults standing ready outside the new castle. "Fire at the red dragon." The captains cried their commands and the catapults launched, sending the stones flying into the skies above. For a moment, it looked like they would miss, but then there was a great thud, and the huge body of the red dragon fell out of the clouds, twisting wildly in the air. The catapults had broken Ra's leg, and thick purple blood poured from the wound onto the buildings below. The people screamed, as it looked like he might fall onto the city and squash it. But Ra regained his balance and stared down at the city. "I'll destroy you all!" "No, you won't!" cried Gar, bursting out of the clouds and slamming into Ra. "Leave them alone!" Gar pushed Ra away from the city and kept him there, and as they continued to fight, the king's men prepared the catapults to fire again. "This time, aim for the green one," he said, "but wait until my word." "You know that they killed Ba, and yet you defend them!" cried Ra. "Brother, what has happened to you?" "If we kill them, we will be no better than them," said Gar, fire shooting out of his mouth with every word. "You're a disgrace!" screamed Ra. But he couldn't keep fighting. His leg was losing lots of blood, and Gar was pushing him back again and again. Weakened and defenseless, Ra had no choice but to give up. "I'll be back," he cried, before disappearing towards his mountain. The people cheered, the king told his men to hold their fire, and Gar slowly came down to rest by the castle. He was beaten and bruised, but nowhere near as hurt as Ra had been. "I am so sorry," said the dragon. "He has always been so wrapped up in rage. I wish he would understand." "Do not worry," said the king. "We are lucky to have you to protect us. With your help, the kingdom is safe, and our new castle is almost finished. We must have a celebration tomorrow, after the last stone is put in place. You will be our guest of honor." The rest of the king's men looked surprised and uneasy about this development, but they did not dare speak against their king. Gar smiled broadly and said, "I would love it, but now I must go and sleep, for it has been a long day." "Of course, my friend." Gar flew back to his mountain to rest, and while he slept, the king made plans. The next day, the construction was finished in record time, and a huge feast was held throughout the new castle and the entire city. Despite the remaining fear from the day before, the people gathered in the streets, pulling out tables and piling them up with food, to say thanks to their great defender, Gar the dragon. Gar, so used to the rough ways of his own kind, was happy that the humans appreciated him so much, and ate and drank until he could hardly stand up. He had gone that morning to speak to his brother, but Ra had placed a huge boulder over the entrance to his lair, shutting Gar out. It would only be a matter of time, thought Gar, so he tried to forget about their fight while he ate and drank. But while the celebrations went on, one of the king's men slipped away and went to Ra's lair. He slipped through a crack between the boulder and the rock wall and hid in a dark corner. The dragon raged about the cave, smashing whatever he could find. "We can't forgive them!" he screamed. "They've been planning this the whole time!" As the assassin listened, he became more and more convinced of his duty. This dragon was a threat to them all. Eventually, Ra tired himself out and fell down onto the floor to sleep, and the assassin did his work, using the same poison that the knight had previously. The next day, still sleepy from the celebrations, Gar went back to Ra's mountain. "Brother, let me in," he cried. "We must make peace, for Bar's sake." But there was no response. Tired of waiting, Gar pushed the boulder aside and entered into the lair. "Brother, wake up! Let us talk." But Ra did not move an inch. Gar leant down close to him and shook him, but the dragon's eyes did not open. And then Gar smelled something coming from the body. Carnations. Gar felt a boiling in the bottom of his stomach, an anger which he had never experienced before. He had been wrong, oh so wrong, and now he had lost both of his brothers because of it. He cried bitter tears. His brother looked so weak and defeated, lying there on the stone floor. They had left his head in place, but what good was that? Gar knew what he needed to do. Quiet as a snake, he flew down towards the kingdom where the sun was just starting to rise, and most of the city still slept. With the careful precision of a trained artist, he breathed a wave of flame over the buildings. The fire waved out like the petals of a carnation, setting everything on fire. The people inside screamed and ran, jumping out of windows, but the flowers of fire poured over every roof and down every street, claiming more and more sections of the city as the great creature headed towards the castle. "My king!" cried the advisor, running into his bedroom. "Gar is coming for us! He is setting the city on fire! What should we do?" "What? That monster has betrayed us! Prepare the catapults and keep everyone important inside. This stone cannot be harmed by dragon fire, remember?" The king smiled. "He built it himself." The catapults rained boulders down on the dragon, but he quickly flew from side to side, avoiding them. One or two struck him, but they only slowed his descent. Gar did not waste a single drop of fire on the building, instead landing on top of it and gripping it with his claws. The king and all his men felt the castle shake from within. When they looked out of the windows, they saw the green, leathery skin of the dragon, and they knew their time was at its end. Just as he had built it, Gar tore the castle apart brick by brick, throwing them aside like the torn-off petals of a flower. The royal family, their advisors and soldiers panicked, fleeing into the burning remains of the city, anything to get away from the cold hard stare of the dragon with his razor-sharp teeth, leaning just meters above them. The king did not escape, however. Despite his overwhelming fear, he stood proudly in front of the creature. "You broke your promise. You killed my brothers." "No," said the king. "It was a knight from abroad." "Do you really think I am so stupid to believe that? You could have had peace. We had peace. And you destroyed it. For what? To be remembered a few more decades by your people? Now you will be remembered forever as the king who brought his people to ruin." And without another word, Gar tore off the king's head and flew back to his lair. The city burned, and the kingdom between the three mountains was soon forgotten. But not everyone died in the fire. A few hundred survived, fleeing from the burning city into the surrounding fields. And one man, no matter how much he tried, was unable to escape. Deep beneath the ruins of the castle, in the darkest dungeon, sat the foreign knight, Bar's murderer. "Hello? What's going on up there?" The fireproof stones prevented the flames from coming down and killing him, but foul smoke filled the darkness. He felt like death himself was coming to take his breath away. But the knight was denied such a kind fate. The smoke did not kill him, and although he screamed and shouted, nobody came to help. He was truly alone, and he died alone, just as the two slain dragons had. For glory comes with a high price. Once there was a boy called Norm who lived with his stepmother. Like all stepmothers, she was wicked, and she spent all day shouting at Norm. "It's freezing in here! Where's the firewood? Oh, if only Sabrina were here!" Sabrina was her own daughter, who had died the day Norm was born, the same day that Norm's father abandoned them in the dirty little hut where they lived. So Norm grew up under the thumb of his cruel stepmother, never allowed to play with other children, go too far away from the house, or even to have time to himself. Despite all the misery that surrounded him, Norm was a happy boy. He cheerfully prayed for his stepmother's death every night, and he was sure that it would eventually come. But it seemed his prayers were insufficient, as she continued to complain and shout at him with just as much energy, until he grew up into a young man. Unlike his stepmother, Norm changed a great deal. He grew tall and strong, and tired of shivering inside their hut, unable to sleep from hunger, he started planting fruit trees and vegetables, and gradually made friends with some farm animals so he could steal them away to the house. He even rebuilt the little hut, making it strong and waterproof. One day, Norm looked at his stepmother in her dirty clothes and said, "Mother, I'm leaving home."
"What?"
she spat.
"Where will you go? Who will look after me?"
"You have animals, fruit trees, and a good roof over your head. I think you can look after yourself well enough. As for me, I am going out to become a hero."
"A hero?"
She laughed wickedly in his face.
"Oh, my sweet child, you know so little of the world."
"Then it is time I went out and learned. Goodbye, mother." And with that, Norm headed out into the world. While he had grown up sheltered and lonely, his stepmother had at least done one good thing for him and told him stories every night. So rarely did he leave home that Norm was convinced that the world was just like in the stories, full of noble knights and fearsome dragons, talking snakes and kind wizards, and he intended to find all of it. After wandering for several days, Norm came to a small castle. Following the stories he knew so well, he went to introduce himself to the king. "Well, you are a strong young man, aren't you?" said the king. "Perhaps you would like to join my army." "No, I want to become a hero." "But my boy, soldiers are heroes." Norm frowned. That wasn't in the stories. "Don't you have some important task to give me? A dragon to kill, maybe?" Said the king, stroking his bushy beard. "No dragons, but I do have a task." Norm's ears went up. "Yes?" "You see that tower over there?" The king pointed out of the window to a tower on the far side of the castle. It looked cold and unwelcoming, the stones worn by time. It had to contain some kind of mysterious treasure, or perhaps a fearsome monster. Norm's heart started to beat fast. "I want you to clean it and fix the stones." "Oh," said Norm, disappointed. "That's all?" "Well, it is haunted, you see. Nobody else in the castle is brave enough to do it." Saying this, the king stared at some of his men, who pretended not to be seen. "Ghosts?" Norm said with excitement. "Fantastic! And what will my reward be?" "Oh, I don't know. I have some magical pear that my brother gave me. He said it would allow the eater to talk to animals. A waste of time, in my opinion. I severely doubt cows have anything useful to say." "And will I be allowed 3 objects to take with me to the haunted tower?" The king frowned. "What on earth gave you that idea? The only 3 things I'll be giving you are a cloth, a bucket of water, and a broom. Now hurry up and go." So Norm went to the tower and got to work. He was used to gardening and cleaning the yard, so he tidied up the tower in no time, and as he repaired the stone, he started to worry that the ghosts might not appear at all. But just as the sun was setting, he heard a voice behind him. "Well, well, well, if it isn't my next victim." Norm turned around to see a silvery figure standing in front of him, shining in the evening sun. He was a wide man in every way, his stomach stretched out over his belt, his beard spread out like a picnic blanket, and his smile looked like it could hold a plate. He was dressed like a knight, a sword at his hips. "You're the ghost of the tower," Norm said in excitement. "I bet you want to eat me."
"My word,"
said the ghost, visibly disgusted.
"I want no such thing. No, you're going to be the victim of my conversation, dear boy. Do you know how lonely it gets in here?"
"What? You don't even want to scare me?"
"Of course not. Then you'd just run away."
"If you're so bored, why don't you leave?" The ghost said, and crossed his arms.
Nobody seems to know how being a ghost works. I can only leave a place if I am wanted by someone. Otherwise, I must haunt the last place I was wanted. Of course, I wasn't aware of that myself during my adventuring days, but since then...
Adventuring? Were you a hero? The ghost's face lit up like a candle.
Why, yes, I was. It's a pleasure to meet someone who still believes in such things. Tell me, boy, do you dream of saving beautiful princesses and killing powerful dragons?
Yes, yes, said Norm, dropping his broom in excitement.
Well then, prepare to be disappointed. That sort of heroism hasn't been around since long before my time, let alone yours.
Norm felt his heart break in two. Then, what kind of heroic things did you do?
Oh, you know, I rescued an escaped farm animal here, fought in a battle there. I trained young knights and found evil criminals.
You're just a mercenary.
Hey,
said the ghost, turning a deep shade of red.
I am not one of those stupid little mercenaries, thank you very much. It wouldn't hurt to pay some respect to your elders, boy.
Norm lowered his head. I'm sorry. It's the first time I've met another hero.
That's all right,
said the ghost, floating over and patting him on the back. But Norm couldn't feel the pats, and the ghost's hand just flew through him.
Tell you what, if you take me out of here, I'll give you advice on how to be the best hero you can be. Or at least on how to get people to buy you drinks in bars.
Wonderful, said Norm. Now I just have to finish this work. What's your name, by the way?
Elric.
Can I call you El?
Absolutely not,
said Elric, but he couldn't quite stop himself from smiling. The ghost sat in the corner and impatiently waited while Norm fixed up the wall, chatting the whole time. Then Norm told the ghost to wait there while he went to get his reward.
My, you made quick work of that, said the king. You could be a royal cleaner, you know.
No thanks, said Norm. I have an adventure to go on.
Yes, well, I'm sure this will help you. Sorry, got a bit damaged.
The king handed him the pear wrapped in a handkerchief. Clearly, its magical qualities hadn't done much to preserve it, as it was black and soft and leaking juices. How long have you had this?
I don't know, said the king. I just threw it onto the pile of magical objects. There are so many these days.
Norm waited until he and Elric were safely out of the castle and in the forest before he unwrapped the pear.
I wouldn't eat that if I were you, said the ghost, eyeing the rotten pear suspiciously.
Heroes have no fear.
There are many more reasons besides fear to not eat rotten food. But don't let me stop you. It would be rather amusing if we were both ghosts.
Norm ignored him. Just think of what he could do if he could talk to animals. It was too great of an opportunity to ignore. So he held his nose, took a deep breath, and forced the pear into his mouth.
My word, I didn't think you were actually going to do it.
Norm wanted to throw up, but forced himself to swallow the pear whole, and then, just to make sure the magic worked, licked the remaining juices off the handkerchief.
Ugh!
He cried. His eyes watered, his nose ran, and he coughed helplessly. But eventually he recovered, and he jumped up and said, "Let's go find an animal friend to talk to." Much to his surprise, however, every time they approached a bird or a fox, the animal just ran away. "Wait! Come back!" cried the boy.
"You need to be more careful," said Elric disapprovingly. "Don't just run at them. Listen."
So Norm crawled into the bushes and waited until some birds landed overhead, and then listened in on their conversation. His heart sped up. He had always wondered what animals were talking about. What magical secrets might they hold? "Horrible weather today, Sharon," said one of the birds. "Just horrible," said the other. "Say, Bob, ate any good worms recently?" "Nah, Sharon, the worms just aren't juicy at the moment." "I blame the horrible weather." "Oh, it is horrible weather, isn't it, Bob? Absolutely disgusting." I know. I heard from Harry that the worms aren't so good at the moment." "Oh, that'll be the weather." "Hey, Sharon, do you want to sing for a bit?" "I can't, Bob. The weather's too bad." Norm stared up in shock. This was what birds talked about? "Hey," he said, standing up. "Have you heard about any princesses that need rescuing around here?" Bob and Sharon exploded into the air, flying around and screaming wildly. "A human is talking to us! A human is talking to us! It must be the bad weather, Bob! Let's fly away!" So the birds flew away, and once again Norm was alone with Elric. "Well?" asked the ghost. "Any juicy gossip?" "Never mind," mumbled Norm, defeated. "Let's find somewhere to sleep for the night."
"Sleep? You know I don't sleep, my boy. I'm a ghost."
That night was the worst in Norm's life. Not only was Elric unable to keep his mouth shut, waking Norm up with his endless chatting, but Norm had to go to the toilet many times, the rotten pear having taken effect. And on top of that, just like the birds had said, it rained heavily throughout the night. In the morning, Norm felt like death warmed over, but he insisted they march until the next big city.
"You look just miserable, my boy," said Elric,
sounding almost sorry for him.
"I would carry you if I could."
When they arrived in the city, Norm went straight to the king and asked him if there were any heroic things he could do.
Well, my Pegasus has run away, you see."
"A flying horse," Norm said, gasping.
"Yes, that is what a Pegasus is, thank you. He was a fearsome warrior, but he disappeared a few weeks ago. Whoever can find him will get an endless supply of riches. Well, not endless."
But by that point, Norm had already been filled with a heroic urge so deep that he ceased to understand the king's words. "I'll find you that Pegasus," he said, before running off into the forest.
"What are you doing?" said Elric. "You should have asked where he might be."
"Doesn't matter. I'll search every inch of the kingdom." Elric sighed in annoyance.
"Sit down, boy, and wait a minute."
Norm reluctantly sat down on a rock and watched Elric. The ghost flew into the air, higher and higher, until his transparent body disappeared into the blue sky. After several minutes, he returned with a big smile on his face.
"Found it! Follow me! But be quiet! I don't want you to scare it away."
So Norm and Elric ran through the forest, but then Norm got tired, and Elric told him off for being so loud, so they walked instead. Would they catch the Pegasus? Would the king give Norm a reward suitable for a hero? Well, to find that out, you'll have to wait for the next chapter. When we last saw our hero in training, Norm, and his ghostly teacher, Elric, they were walking at a sensible pace through the forest to recover the king's lost Pegasus. After several hours of walking, filled with Elric insisting they quietly play a variety of childish word games, they arrived at the cave where the creature was hiding. Norm gasped when he saw the magnificent animal. Its wings were long and elegant, as if taken from an angel, and it had skin as pure and white as snow. But far from wandering elegantly through the trees, the creature was sitting on the floor of the cave, reading a book.
"I didn't know horses could read,"
muttered Elric.
"He's not a horse," said Norm. "Now wait here while I go and talk to him. I don't want you to scare him off." "No," hissed the ghost. "You're no good at this, even if you can talk to animals. Let's do it my way. We'll capture a foal and trap it. The Pegasus will see it and its animal instincts will kick in. And then you'll throw a net over it and Bob's your uncle. We'll be back at the castle in no time with the Pegasus."
"Bob's not my uncle. I don't have an uncle. Bob was the name of that bird." Norm paused and thought over Elric's plan. He didn't like it for several reasons. For one, how are they going to get hold of a foal in a net? But more importantly, it didn't seem like the heroic thing to do. And yet, what did Norm know of heroism? All his attempts at it so far had failed. But he couldn't deny his heart. No creature that magnificent deserved to be caught in a net and dragged to its master. So Norm stood up and said, "Hello there." The Pegasus jumped, ripping a page out of the book with his hoof. "Don't be scared. I'm not going to hurt you." "What book are you reading?" For a long moment, the Pegasus didn't move a muscle and just stared at him in silence. Then he said, "How can you talk to me?" "I ate a magic pear." I thought they stopped growing those years ago." "Well, if you must know, I'm reading the Almanac of Dragons." "Fancy," said Norm. "What's it about?" "Dragons." "Oh, I probably could have guessed that from the title." "What do you want?" said the Pegasus. Despite his overwhelming beauty, he spoke in a cold, practical manner. He couldn't just say he wanted to take him to the king, could he? "I heard you ran away from the king. Why is that?" "And why would I tell you? You're just looking for a reward. Is he offering endless riches this time, or did he say he would be forever thankful?" "The first one. But no, I'm not here to help the king." "True. You don't look like one of those mercenaries the king hires. You're not even wearing armor. I could crush you with one hoof." Norm gulped. "Yeah, you could." The Pegasus sighed. "I suppose there's no harm in telling you why I ran away. Perhaps you can pass the message on to the king from me and he can leave me alone." The Pegasus stepped out of the cave and walked around, never taking his eye off Norm. "I never liked that fighting business. I'm a scholar, really. I've fought in many battles." Here he moved his neck to point at his scar-covered back. "And I've killed many men. But for what? So that a drunk man can fill his pockets and continue to crush the people under his boot?" "Did the king hurt you?" The Pegasus turned round and stared at Norm. "Yes, he did." "I'm sorry. I know what that's like. I'm not a warrior, at least not yet. I want to be a hero. But my stepmother is wicked and beats you every day." "Almost. She never hit me, just said mean words." "We've got almost all the cliches in the book between us. A drunken king and a wicked stepmother. Next you'll tell me you're being accompanied by the ghost of a great hero who's teaching you how to become one yourself."
"I'm no cliche,"
bellowed Elric, floating out of the bushes. "Speak of the devil," said the Pegasus. "This is Elric. It's kind of a long story." "I have a vivid imagination. I can figure it out." "But really, what are you looking for, boy? Most people wouldn't track down a killer Pegasus without a good reason to do so." "I admit, I was looking to get the king's reward. That is, until I saw you." "You're beautiful," he whispered. Oh, so if I was ugly, you would have sent me back to the king? I can tell you don't read books. You're just full of incorrect assumptions.
Hey, leave the boy alone, cried Elric. He's just a kid doing his best to become a hero. He may be stupid, but he's,
very brave? He said this last part in a very doubtful tone. Thank you, Elric. The Pegasus smiled. My apologies. I haven't been able to talk to anyone apart from old war horses for many years now. My manners have deteriorated. And now I must ask you a favor. Will you go back to the king and tell him that I died? Spare no details. Tell him that I was cut apart and that my body parts are being eaten by birds. Ugh, said Norm. I mean, I can. I think that's the only way he'll leave me alone. All I want is to read my books in peace. But there was a hint of loneliness in the beautiful creature's voice. All right, said Norm. I'll tell him. I am aware that the temptation of gold can conquer even the strongest man, so if you do this for me, I will give you a reward myself. Meet me on that hill at sunset. He gestured into the distance, where a low hill rose up out of the forest. Why? Is it a magical hill? No, it just means I'll be able to see you if you're coming with the king's men to betray me. And believe me, you don't want to betray me. So Norm went to deliver the message to the king, which was considerably difficult on his part, as acting was not one of his strongest skills. But with Elric's coaching, the ex-hero seemed to be exceptionally skilled at lying. They made it out of the castle and headed for the hill, where the Pegasus was waiting for them. I realized I didn't tell you my name, said the creature. I'm trying to become more polite, but it's a difficult process. I am Kvak. That's a beautiful name, said Norm. Don't lie to me. It's ugly. Anyway, here is your reward. Norm blinked and looked around. Oh, is it an invisible sword? Kvok snorted. You need to get over your obsession with magical objects. No, it is me. Huh? I know I said before that I just wanted a quiet life of reading, but a Pegasus does get lonely. As foolish as it seems, I'd like to accompany you on your journey. Fantastic, said Norm, his mind filling with romantic images of him riding Kvok dressed in a shining suit of armor. Don't get any ideas, though, said Kvok. I won't let you ride me unless it's strictly necessary. Oh, said Norm, trying and failing to hide his disappointment. Now, I had to fly around and collected information, said Kvok, and I heard about a dragon who's been attacking the city of Fever to the east, stealing jewels and gold from the people. I couldn't believe that sort of thing still happens, but it makes a perfect task for a young hero in training, don't you think? Yes, cried Norm, jumping into the air and punching it.
Just one problem, my boy, said Elric. You don't have a sword, a shield, or even a piece of armor. Besides, you're completely untrained.
Kvok smiled devilishly. Don't worry, I have a plan. So as they travelled to the city on foot, the Pegasus explained his plan to them. Clearly, those books he had been reading, Norm was forced to drag the heavy chest full of them, contained some awful stuff, as the plan was the work of someone with a truly sick mind. I thought you didn't like violence, said Norm. I never said that. I just like applying it strategically. When they arrived at the city of Fever, it was clear to see why the dragon had chosen it. It was covered in wealth, the streets made of elegant stones with romantic lamps and imposing statues on either side, down which paraded finely dressed citizens with noses almost as high as their expensive hats. The mayor even lived in a tower of gold. "Ah, you have come to deal with a dragon problem, yes?" he said, eyeing their odd appearance with a frown. "Fantastic. You'll find his lair an hour north of here, in the caves." "Aren't you going to help us? Perhaps with some legendary armor or magical objects?" said Norm hopefully. If he couldn't live out his dream of fighting a dragon, he could at least get some free equipment. The mayor scoffed. "Do heroes not equip themselves these days? You should consider yourself lucky I even allowed you into my home with such dirty clothes. Now go and do your job, boy." So the three adventurers carried out their plan. First, they had to acquire a sword. Kvok told Elric and Norm to go relax at a pub, giving them some coin to buy drinks with, while the Pegasus went off to find a sword. Norm was sure that he was in fact stealing it, but he didn't dare challenge the creature. He was still in awe of him, and the more he talked to Kvok, the more that awe turned to fear. He did not want to get on his wrong side. Once they had the sword, they went into the grasslands surrounding the city and found every snake they could, breaking their necks and collecting them in a bag. It made Norm feel a bit sick, but Kvok insisted that they follow his plan, so he kept quiet. Elric flew around finding the animals, but it was Norm who actually had to kill them, and he got more than one bite on his arm. Thankfully, they weren't the poisonous kind. Once they had collected a heavy bag of snakes, they went to the dragon's lair, poured the dead creatures onto the ground, and got to work. Each one they sliced open, spilling its guts out onto the earth. Dragons, although they view themselves as far superior, feel a great connection to snakes, because they believe that is their biological origin, Kvok had said on their way to Orphiva. "If we launch a psychological attack, we can make it angry, and when dragons are angry, they're stupid. They have very strong biological instincts, you see. During my information gathering, I discovered this one has a weak spot on its stomach. So we'll get it angry and then you'll fly in, Norm. Yes, I'll let you ride me just this once and cut it open with the sword." Norm was frightened but terribly excited at the same time. Elric too became enthusiastic, coaching Norm on sword techniques during every spare moment. Once they had finished their reptilian murder session, they ran into the bushes nearby and hid, waiting for the dragon to come out. And you too must wait, dear reader, because this story has yet another chapter to go. But do not worry, friends. Soon you will find out the thrilling tale of the battle with the dragon. You simply must be patient like a snake in the long grass. Although hopefully your guts will remain in place. When we last saw our heroes, and I do use that term lightly, they were hiding in the bushes, waiting outside the lair of the dragon, the ground covered in smelly snake guts designed to wake the monster's rage. They spent many long, tedious hours waiting. Norm looked around and found some mushrooms, which Elric encouraged him to try, but Kvok was convinced they were deadly poisonous, and this led into an endless debate which made Norm regret finding the mushrooms in the first place. Eventually, though, just as Elric was explaining his detailed encounters with mushrooms during his heroic journeys, the dragon came out of the cave and Norm told them to shut up. It was a fearsome creature, or at least it would have been if it was the correct size. It had skin as black as the night, razor-sharp claws and teeth, its wings spreading out like city walls, or at the very least like very threatening bedsheets. But the dragon was small, far smaller than any of them had expected, and as it walked outside, yawning, Norm found it hard to believe that this little thing had threatened any town. As soon as the dragon saw the snakes, it gave a cry and jumped backwards, its eyes wide at the sight before it. It started shaking, its hands curling up by its sides.
"Yes, here it comes," said Elric. "Get ready, boy."
Quietly, Norm started to climb onto Kvok, but the dragon did not burst into a fit of rage, breathe fire, or scream into the sky. It cried. The sound was loud and sharp like a knife, forcing Norm to cover his ears. It made the acid in his stomach shake like a drum, but there was nothing frightening about the dragon's reaction. Big fat tears rolled down its cheeks as it made an expression of complete misery and bit at its claws.
Who would do this?
The dragon fell to the ground and curled up into a ball. It seemed like he was trying to squeeze every last bit of water from his body, and just when they thought he had finished, he opened his eyes again, saw the snakes, and began crying once more.
This is the fearsome dragon that is attacking the people of Orfever?
Said Elric, alarmed.
I thought kittens more threatening.
Norm stared at the dragon, frozen by the scene. Kvok pushed him with his nose. Go on, boy. Now's our chance. Norm shook his head. No. He dropped his sword to the ground and walked through the bushes. Hello there. The dragon didn't hear him, so loud was his crying. I said hey. The dragon rolled around on the ground, a pool of water forming beneath him, but he still did not hear Norm. Hey! Screamed the boy. The dragon stopped, opened his eyes red with tears, and looked up.
What do you want? Do you know who did this?
Norm sighed heavily. He was about to take a risk. As pathetic as this dragon was, he was probably still dangerous. But he couldn't hide the truth from him. We did.
We?
Reluctantly, Elric and Kvok approached from the bushes. The dragon had sat up now, sniffing and rubbing his face dry. We were trying to be heroes, said Norm quietly. We heard you were stealing from the city and, well...
I don't understand, said the dragon, shaking his head. Why didn't you come and attack me like all the others?
You have defeated others? Said Kvok, practically sneering.
Not myself, no. They walk into my traps and then I tie them up, fly them somewhere else and leave them there. Sometimes the same ones come back several times, but they never get through.
Elric snorted.
It's like someone throwing a spider out of their home. Personally, I always crush them. You what? Said the dragon, shocked. You kill poor innocent spiders?
The dragon looked like he might burst into tears again just at the thought of it. We wanted to launch a psychological attack, said Norm, staring at the ground. Clearly, it was a mistake.
If you care this much about killing me...
The dragon rolled over, revealing his stomach.
Then do it, human!
The sad, pathetic creature was gone, replaced by a cold determination.
Spill my guts out onto the ground. If you'll kill others in my name, then I'd rather you ended me directly. I'll just ask one thing of you. Look me in the eyes while you do it.
Said Norm, suddenly feeling very uncomfortable. I've decided that we don't want to kill you anymore. Said Elric, folding his arms.
It would be shameful to kill such a strange thing.
There's no joy in fighting an enemy who doesn't strike back, muttered Kvok. Secretly, I was hoping you would give the boy a serious injury, and he would end up bleeding to death in a manner truly appropriate of a hero. Elric and Norm stared at the Pegasus. What? I was joking. Obviously. The dragon rolled back onto his feet.
Well, if you're not going to kill me, then move aside. I've got work to do.
Apparently, he had gotten over his emotional reaction rather quickly.
Where are you going?
Said Elric.
To steal? Steal is an ugly word. I prefer reappropriate.
Taking gold to your lair isn't reappropriation, said Kvok, sneering.
Who said I was taking it to my lair? Have you seen the west side of Orfeva? They don't like to show it to visitors. It's where all the poor live, the homeless, the children without parents, the diseased. I bring the gold to them. I'm just redistributing the city's wealth. I could murder those people and the mayor wouldn't care. But because I'm helping them, I'm public enemy number 1.
The dragon spread his wings and prepared to take flight.
I'm Snively, by the way. If you cross me again, I will tear out your guts like you did to those poor snakes.
Norm gulped. Snively was unpredictable, but there was no doubt that he was dangerous.
If you don't want to kill me, the least you could do is clean up the mess you made and hold a funeral for each of them.
And with that, Snively flew away to do his work as Robin Hood. Norm scratched his head. You know, I'm starting to think this hero business isn't all that great. Oh, come on, let's clean this up.
What about the funerals? Said Elric. It would take weeks to do them all.
We'll just hold one big one, said Norm, hoping that wouldn't anger the dragon. Kvok sneered. I should have stayed in my cave and read more books. I wouldn't have to bury snakes and give them funerals there. They got to work, digging a hole in the forest and dumping the snake bodies inside. Elric held the funeral, as he claimed he had attended the deaths of many brave heroes, but it soon became apparent that he was just making things up.
And I am sure that these snakes were very, very loved. If only cruel fate had not taken them away so soon, they could be going and shedding their skin and doing whatever else it is that snakes do.
Of the 3 of them, Norm was the most sorry for their actions. Elric couldn't take things seriously, but he did at least regret what they did. Kvok was quiet and grumpy, but Norm was sure he would understand eventually. Later that evening, Snively returned to his cave and, seeing the clean ground, smiled broadly.
I didn't think you'd actually do it,
he said, sniffing and wiping his cheek.
Oh, sorry, I've been crying again. One of the kids showed me his drawing and it was so impressive. He drew a perfect little spider. Or maybe it was a kangaroo. I'm not sure. Would you like to come in for a cup of tea?
With nowhere else to go, they happily agreed. Snively led them through a complicated series of tunnels, undoing his traps to let them past, until they arrived in a cosy little home, complete with a well-stocked kitchen. They sat down and got to chatting, telling the dragon all about their adventures so far. Or at least Norm and Snively chatted, while Kvok and Elric exchanged dark looks and whispered to each other. And what's the point of being king if you're not even going to use your magical pear? He let it go rotten. Stupid man, really. I mean, what king abuses his own horse? It made me feel sick. And don't get me started on that mayor. He made you sound so awful. If I see him again...
Oh, I completely agree. Why do you think I started this in the first place? You would make a great dragon, you know. You're so right. I should eat him just for that.
Eventually, Elric and Kvok's whispers got too much for Norm, and he turned around and said, "What? You two have been whispering all evening. What are you talking about?"
"We were just discussing your quest, my boy," said Elric. "Or rather, the lack of it."
"Norm," said Kvok, slapping a hoof on the table. "Do you actually want to be a hero?" Norm's lip shook. "Of course I do. How could you ask such a thing?"
"It's only that, well, I did tell you that heroes don't really exist anymore, but you convinced me for a while that they did, with that endless enthusiasm you have. But heroes don't go around helping ghosts, freeing Pegasi, and making friends with dragons, and they certainly don't speak badly of the kings they serve."
"Are you calling me a bad hero?" said Norm, going red. "You know it's my dream."
"No,"
said Snively, putting his claw on the boy's hand.
"What they're saying is that you're far too good to waste your time trying to become some idea of a fairy tale hero. You can just be you."
Norm looked between the three of them. They all seemed to know him so well, far better than he'd ever known himself. He couldn't understand it. "But if I can't be a hero, what will I do? And what will you two do?" Snively grinned, wrapping his wings around the three of them.
"You can come live here. There's plenty of space and it's completely safe. Maybe then the people of Orphever will start to see that I'm not all bad and overthrow their mayor or something revolutionary like that."
Said Kvok, raising his nose proudly. "I'll consider it."
"I suppose it's better than living in that dusty old tower," Elric muttered. "And I wouldn't be having to save Norm's life every 5 minutes. What do you say, boy? Shall we settle down here?"
Norm stared into his tea and then said, "It's a wonderful idea. But first, I have something I have to do. Alone." The next day, Norm set off for his stepmother's house. He took some of Snively's reappropriated wealth and bought a set of warm clothes from Orphever, as well as a magic log that burned forever. She had always complained about being cold, but with good clothes and a never-ending fire, she would be more than warm enough. When Norm finally arrived, however, he did not find the house loud with his stepmother's complaints. He found the vegetables in the garden dead, the roof collapsed, and the animals ran away. The place was empty, apart from his stepmother's bones lying on her bed. She had never been a good mother, or even very nice, and yet he found himself shedding tears for her. She didn't deserve to die alone, abandoned by her only child. It made him think of his companions. If he hadn't rescued Elric from the tower, would the ghost have gone mad with loneliness? If he hadn't freed Kvok, would he have died under the hands of a cruel king? If he had fought Snively, would he have killed a kind soul, as well as the hope of all the poor in Orphever? He had abandoned her, and she had already faced so much loss, her husband leaving her and her daughter dying. She had been nasty, but not wicked. If it wasn't for the stories she told him, he would have never left on his adventure in the first place. "I'm sorry, Mother," he said, touching her bones, "but there is one last thing I can do for you." He packed up her remains, got on his horse, and rode to Snively's lair. He buried the bones outside it. "You'll never be cold here. It's warmed by dragon fire." From that day on, Norm, Elric and Kvok lived happily with Snively the dragon. They couldn't have been more different, and yet they somehow got along, although they still had plenty of arguments. They all helped out with Snively's missions into Orphever, and sure enough, with their help, the abused masses of the city rose up and overthrew their mayor, founding an independent city-state based on equality. Kvok got to brutally kill the mayor, which he greatly enjoyed. Elric taught the new generation of children to read, and Norm flew on Snively's back to other cities and countries to spread the word of the dragon and to redistribute the happiness and wealth that the four friends owned. Norm never dreamed of becoming a brave hero again, because in reality, he had been one all along.